Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
We're just working on some technology here. Technology is great when it works. I've been asked to just give a 5 to 10-minute talk on something that was done during this last weekend for the pastors. Dan Jackson, our NAD president, wrote a book along with Paul Brantley, the vice president at the NAD, and the Florida Conference president. And the book was on how to have a strategic planning. Our mission in the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to make disciples of all nations and to bring the three of those messages to the world. And so how do we do that? And part of it is we need to have a strategy. And so I presented something to the pastors this past weekend, which is what Robert wants me to share with you right now. The whole context was that we had REACH representatives. When I say REACH, I mean strategic planning people who plan according to the 5 core values of REACH, R-E-A-C-H. Each of those letters represent a value that we want to live out. And there's REACH representatives across Canada that were at Camp Hope last weekend. And part of that was that we were disseminated out into the churches around Camp Hope, 10 churches, and we gave basically a lecture, a sermon, and then a training event in the afternoon. And then on Sunday, 22 more pastors came to Camp Hope and received some more training on how to be strategic planners. How can we go about leading our church to really make a difference? We needed to plan. It's not just a matter of hoping something good's going to happen. And so in the middle of all that context, I presented this, which is what Robert would like me to share with you. And so you see there up on the screen, it's called REACH, and each of those letters represents the 5 core value. The R, I won't tell you now, I'll tell you later. So let's take a look. Now on the screen, this gentleman here represents someone who needs to be reached. He's a person who's lost. He's a person who is your neighbor. Maybe he's a relative of yours. And Jesus says, we need to save that guy. Jesus died for that guy. And then the idea was to turn that guy into that guy, because Jesus says to make disciples of all nations in Matthew 28:19 and verse 20. And so imagine now that the fellow here on the left is going to become the fellow on the right, but how is he going to do that? What process is he going to go through? Because Jesus says, that's your job. I called the church into existence for this. As a matter of fact, let me read to you the opening paragraph of Acts of Apostles. It says about the purpose of the church. The church is God's appointed agency for the salvation of men. So what about that? Our church exists for a reason, as an agency, as to be used as a conduit, as a tool in God's hands to help God save the world. And God wants to bring us into existence to do that. It goes on. It was organized for service, and its mission is to carry the gospel to the world. From the beginning, it has been God's plan that through His church shall be reflected to the world His fullness and sufficiency. What does that mean? Well, it has a whole lot to do with God's character, God's power, and God's love. The members of the church, those whom He has called out of darkness into His marvelous light, are to show forth His glory, to give glory to God, like we just heard about in the Sabbath school lesson in the first angel's message. The church is the repository of the riches of the grace of Christ. And through the church will eventually be made manifest, even to the principles and powers in heavenly places, the final and full display of the love of God. How will God reveal His love to the world? Through the church. So, having said that, now Jesus says to His people, I want you to help that happen by turning this guy into a fully devoted follower of Jesus, an ambassador for Christ, a disciple, really. And so let's just imagine him on a scale of -10 to a +10. Now, a -10 on this particular scale is somebody who's far, far away from God. He's an atheist, or he's agnostic, or he's a pagan, or he's indifferent or hostile. He's just far away from God. And then he becomes a -9, -8, -7, -5, and now he's learning that maybe there's a God out there, maybe the Bible's inspired after all, and now he's a -1, and then he's converted, and that's what the cross represents. He's converted, he's born again. And then the +1, the +2, on the other side, he's a baby Christian. And then a +3, +4, +5, he's a growing Christian, and then he's a leader, self-motivated leader in God's cause, a +10. So, can you see that? From -10 to +10. And the sections and scales and phases that he goes through is represented by these yellow boxes. So this, I was -10 at one time, I was an atheist at one time, and some of you were too, and you had to go through a process. But here is what the church is about. While he or she is going through a process of coming closer and closer to God, and eventually making that decision, what is the church doing to help him move through those stages? That's the question. And so here we have in the blue community outreach and evangelism. That's part of what the church does to help him make connections with church people and then with God himself. Once he's converted, the next step is for him to become educated in his discipleship. And the church's job is to help that happen. So the question is as church people, and hey, by the way, if you're visiting here today, welcome aboard. We pray that God speaks to you this day. But I'm talking now to those who are church members. Church members have a job to do to help that fellow become that fellow. And so our job is to educate people from baby Christians to maturing Christians, and from maturing Christians into leadership Christians. And then part of that includes revival, includes alignment, includes leadership. And so when we think about what Jesus said, he said, I send you out as sheep among wolves. But do you know what he said afterwards? He said, therefore, be as harmless as doves, and as what? As wise as serpents. And that word wise is a very interesting word. Jesus is comparing us to serpents. It's the only place in the Bible, it's in Matthew, I forget where, Matthew, chapter 10 or something, where Jesus says, you need to be like doves, you need to be like serpents, and you are like sheep. And the only thing in those 4 animals that Jesus spoke of that's not like us is the wolves. The wolves are the -10s out there. It's the ones who are antagonistic or indifferent or hostile to Christianity. That's the wolves. And Jesus says, I send you like sheep among the wolves. That's why you have to be as wise or as cunning or as stealthy or as, what's the word, strategic as serpents. The Greek word for where it says wise in that context is strategic. We cannot walk up to a wolf as a sheep. Say, hello, Mr. Wolf. I'm here to make you like me. What's the wolf going to say to you?
I'm going to eat you.
I think I'm going to eat you for lunch. That's what the wolf is going to say. So we can't do it. That's why we need to be strategic. And God has taught us how to be strategic. Jesus also said, I want to make you fishers of men. So in another way, not only are we trying to reach wolves, we're trying to reach fish. So Jesus uses all these analogies. And so different fish need different bait. So what I'm saying is, in order to understand our job, our purpose, our mandate, our commission, our mission, we need to understand how God works in the world and how he wants to use us. And that's why I put this up on the screen here, for us to understand the big picture. What are we doing to help him grow from step to step? Let's just make sure one thing we're not doing, and is we're not doing what, say, a grade 2 teacher would do if a grade 2 teacher taught grade 10 math to a grade 2 student. Even though grade 10 math is the truth, a grade 2 student doesn't need that truth yet. That is why we need to teach grade 2 math to grade 2 students. And this is what this takes into. Spiritually speaking, we have babes that need to be fed. What does Paul say? Milk. In the Hebrews and Corinthians, there's milk before the meat. And therefore, what constitutes the milk, what constitutes the meat? When it comes to preaching truth and teaching truth, there's something that comes before something else. It's a process. It takes a strategy. And we need to be sensitized to that. And so let's just put this here. What are we doing as a church to help him make those steps? When he's not a Christian, but yet to become a Christian, we need to think of ways to bless him. Not to prove him wrong, but to be a blessing to him. He'll find out he's wrong on certain doctrines later on. But we need to be a blessing to him. That should be our first goal. And then once he's converted, education for discipleship is what comes in. This is what a church does, is educate people in their discipleship track. Now, the R of reach is the revival and transformation. The E in reach is the education part of discipleship. The A in reach is alliance, about being a team, basically, cooperating together. The C is all that on the left side of the cross there in that graphic. That's community outreach, whatever we're going to do to reach people who are lost. And then the H stands for healthy leadership. A leader who is unhealthy is someone who wants to get attention to himself and somebody who wants to get power for himself. That's an unhealthy leader. A healthy leader is somebody who wants to empower others according to God's spiritual gift for them. And so we want to have healthy leadership. You put those 5 values together, you come up with reach. And that's what we want to do in this conference. I'll talk about that later this afternoon. Now, part of it is not just the idea that we're here to make disciples, and we need to be strategic in doing that. Otherwise, we turn people off if we want to give grade 10 level of truth to a grade 2 level of a Christian or even a non-Christian. So we need to be strategic. But there's something else. God has put this church, us, in this world to, in a sense, show his face to the world. And so let me just put this up on the screen right here. This happens to be mission. I happen to be, I preached in mission last week, and so I showed them this map of mission. And all these arrows represent different people doing the Lord's work, but going in different directions. Or maybe different departments in your church, all working hard, but going in different directions. What if we were aligned together? Now watch this. Now doesn't that look better? We're all going in one direction. When they were all going in different directions, we call that church A. But Jesus wants to be more like church B, which is this church right here. Zoom, there they go. Now let me read this quote. If Christians were to act in concert, that's in harmony, that's in alignment, right? Team, cooperation. If Christians were to act in concert, moving forward as one, under the direction of one power, for the accomplishment of one purpose, what does it say they would do? Move the world. With God as our head and us acting in concert with each other, there's nothing we can't do without the power of Christ. Can you say amen to that? God has called us for that. Now imagine, right now, the world looks at Christianity and they see God as a God of love. They see God, if they see him at all, as vindictive or judgmental or scary or not present. I mean, all kinds of negative things against God. And you can read all kinds of books on there. I'm thinking of Richard Dawkins right now, who wrote The God Delusion, trying to convert people from about here. Now let's just take away the lines, and the idea here is that the church is to be the face of Jesus to the world. That's the big picture of why God called us into existence, of why God called us from the darkness into his marvelous light, so that we together can show a beautiful God to the world around us, so that those who look on will glorify God because of the good works that God has done through us. Can you say amen to that? Amen. So that's just a little talk there, Robert, and thank you, Pastor Rob, and I'll turn it over now to the program.
Okay, thanks, Robert. So you can all see, as Duncan gets set up here to get ready for the praise time, this is why I wanted Ern to actually get up and speak about this morning, because it's so crystal clear to me, and I hope it's all very crystal clear to you. This is our mission. This is our strategy for achieving that mission as well. Okay. So we'll have a time of praise time led by the Duncan group, and then we'll get into our message this morning.